Step away from my jet, boy. The words cracked through Hangar 7 like a whip. Wrenches froze in midair. Conversations died. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward the young black recruit standing near the open-engine cowling of a silent F-35. Darius Thompson didn't move. Grease stained his fingers. A small flashlight and a set of tools rested in his hands. The fighter jet loomed above him like a fallen titan, panels open, insides exposed, its heart completely dead. Colonel Veronica Hale stalked toward him, polished boots striking the concrete in perfect rhythm. Her silver eagles gleamed under the harsh lights, the symbols of 15 hard-fought years in uniform. She stopped inches from him, close enough for him to see his own reflection in the shine of her rank. "What makes you think you can touch a $30 million aircraft?" she demanded. "This isn't some backroad garage." Darius felt the weight of every stare in the hangar. Mechanics, pilots, clerks pretending to work while watching the show. The F-35 had lost power mid-flight during a training run. Tomorrow, NATO officials would be here for a high-stakes demonstration. Right now, the base's crown jewel was a very expensive, very broken statue. "Ma'am," Darius said carefully, "I heard something strange in the engine before it failed." "I think you heard something." Hale let out a sharp laugh. "Our diagnostic computers are confused. My best engineers are confused. And you think your ears know better?" A few people snickered. The sound cut deeper than it should have. For 3 months, Darius had been sweeping floors, hauling crates, wiping oil stains. Anything but the work he'd trained for. On paper, his aptitude scores were top tier. In reality, he was the kid from nowhere with the wrong accent and the wrong skin color for an elite posting like this. He swallowed. "I've been studying the engine manuals in my off time. The pitch right before the power drop." "Manuals?" Hale interrupted. "From where?" "Your community college auto shop." More laughter, nervous but real. Darius's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "I have a mechanical engineering degree, ma'am," he said. "Alabama A&M. I worked 2 jobs to pay my way." "I'm not guessing." The hangar shifted. Some of the faces watching looked surprised. Others looked like they'd suspected as much. Hale's eyes narrowed. It wasn't just that he'd spoken. It was that he'd done it in front of an audience. "A degree from some school I've never heard of doesn't make you an expert," she said coldly. "And it doesn't give you permission to play hero." Behind her, Master Sergeant Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. He knew the numbers. He'd seen Darius's file. But Hale had made it very clear what she thought belonged in her pristine F-35 program. "Here's what's going to happen," Hale announced, raising her voice so it bounced off the curved ceiling. "You're going to put those tools down. You're going to grab a mop. And you're going to leave the difficult problems to people with real qualifications." "With respect, ma'am," Darius said, "if that engine fails mid-flight again, it's more than a difficult problem. Someone could. With respect." Her voice was razor-sharp. Respect is for people who earn it, not recruits pretending they're smarter than the entire maintenance wing. She turned slightly, angling her body so the growing crowd could see her profile, the confident commander putting a loudmouth kid in his place. Phones had appeared, low at first, then brazenly held up, red record lights blinking. "You know what?" she said, smiling thinly. "Let's make this interesting." She pointed at the silent jet. "This F-35 has to be ready by dawn. NATO brass, generals, senators, the whole world will be watching. My best people can't figure out what's wrong." Then she jabbed a finger toward Darius. "So I'll make you a deal, recruit. Fix this engine before dawn, and I will personally recommend you for officer training. I'll sign a letter for MIT. I'll put your name in rooms you can't even spell." The crowd murmured. That alone was huge. But she wasn't done. "In fact," she added, voice dripping sarcasm, "if you fix this engine, I'll marry you myself. I'll wear my dress blues, walk down the aisle, the whole thing." Laughter exploded. Some people doubled over. Others just stared, stunned at how far she was willing to go to humiliate him. Hale basked in it. "What do you say, Thompson?" she asked sweetly. "You going to marry your way into respect, or crawl back to your broom closet?" Darius looked past her to the jet. In his mind, he heard again the wrong note in the engine's voice as it limped in earlier, the off-key whine that hadn't matched any normal failure he knew. And under that, he heard a different voice. Old, rough, steady. "Every engine has a voice, boy. Most folks hear noise. You were born to listen." His grandfather's words wrapped around his fear like armor. I accept, Darius said. The laughter died instantly. Phones lifted a little higher. Hale blinked, just once. You what? I accept your terms, ma'am, he repeated louder. I'll fix the engine before dawn. For a brief second, something like doubt flashed in her eyes. Then pride swallowed it. You have 11 hours, she said flatly. When you fail, and you will fail, I want your transfer request on my desk. Somewhere remote. Somewhere where mops are the most complicated equipment you touch. She turned in a slow circle, addressing everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, place your bets. You're about to see what happens when a janitor thinks he's a jet engineer. But what no one in that hangar understood, not yet, was that Darius Thompson had been preparing for this impossible moment his entire life, in a place the Air Force had never bothered to look. 40 miles outside Montgomery, Alabama, the road turned from broken asphalt to soft red dirt. At the end of that road sat a weather-beaten farmhouse and a barn that leaned like it had survived one storm too many. But inside that barn was the place where Darius Thompson first learned how to read the world through the voices of engines. His grandfather, Samuel Big Sam Thompson, was a legend few had heard of and even fewer had properly thanked. During World War II, Big Sam had served as a mechanic supporting the Tuskegee Airmen, the first black fighter pilots in U.S. history. While the pilots carved their legacy in the skies, Big Sam fought discrimination on the ground, fixing their P-51 Mustangs with whatever tools and scraps he had. When people told him something was beyond repair, he took it personally, and he usually proved them wrong. Come here, boy, Big Sam used to say, tapping the fender of a rusty pickup with a knuckle. Put your hand right there. Little Darius would press his palm against the metal, feeling the hum of a running engine vibrate up his arm. Close your eyes now, his grandfather would continue. Don't listen with your ears. Listen with your hands, with your chest. At first, all Darius felt was shaking and heat. But slowly, over countless summer days spent in that leaning barn, he began picking out patterns. The tiny misfires, the subtle knock of worn bearings, the uneven rhythms that told stories of neglect or hidden problems. Every engine has a voice, Big Sam would say. Most folks too busy talking to hear it. But if you're real quiet, real patient, it'll tell you everything. The world outside wasn't as gentle. Darius saw people underestimate Big Sam every day. Customers talked over him, underpaid him, called him Sammy like he was a child. But they always came back because their machines trusted him more than they did. Why you still help them? Young Darius asked once. They don't treat you right. Big Sam gave a slow smile, deep wrinkles folding around his eyes. Because worth ain't what they think of you, he said. Worth is what you can do when someone needs you most. He tapped Darius's chest with a grease-covered finger. And one day, they're gonna need you. Be ready. Those words stayed with Darius long after Big Sam grew too old to work. In high school, while his classmates saved up for video games and sneakers, Darius spent his free time rebuilding the engine in his beat-up Honda Civic. Not because it was broken, but because he wanted to understand every piece of it. He devoured manuals for aircraft engines he'd never touched. He studied airflow diagrams like they were sacred texts. When college felt financially impossible, he didn't quit. He enrolled at Alabama A&M, worked 2 jobs, warehouse nights, takeout deliveries on weekends, and studied whenever he wasn't exhausted. His professors saw something rare, a student who didn't just learn engineering, but felt it. One summer, he landed an internship at a military aircraft salvage yard. That place was heaven and heartbreak mixed together. Rows of retired F-16s, F-18s, even broken training jets, machines that had once screamed across skies now reduced to scraps. One day, he and his supervisor, an old Air Force mechanic named Garcia, inspected an engine that had failed catastrophically. The official report blamed metal fatigue. But when Darius tapped the compressor housing and listened to the faint, uneven echo inside, something felt wrong. This wasn't fatigue, he said slowly. Something hit it first, from the inside. Garcia frowned. You can't hear that. But 3 hours later, deep in the compressor, they found a twisted bolt, foreign object debris dropped during maintenance and sucked inward like a bullet. Garcia stared at him. How do you even think to look there? Darius shrugged, trying not to smile. Engines tell the truth. You just have to hear it. Garcia clapped him on the shoulder. You ever think about the Air Force? We need people like you. The idea took root. Basic training wasn't easy, but it wasn't harder than what life had already taught him. What he wasn't prepared for was arriving at Fort Kingsley, the elite F-35 training base, and realizing he'd been quietly placed in the lowest track. Cleaning duty instead of diagnostics. Inventory instead of hands-on maintenance. Applications for advanced courses lost or misfiled. Others with lower scores got opportunities he didn't. Others with fancier degrees their parents paid for, got access he wasn't even allowed to request. Still, he stayed late in the hangars, listening to the jets, learning their voices, learning which pilots pushed too hard on takeoff, which engines had stress fractures building, which aircraft needed attention long before their computers ever knew. So when Captain Park's F-35 limped home that afternoon, engine whine climbing too high, too sharp, it sent a chill through him. He knew that sound. He'd heard it in engines dying slow deaths. When diagnostics showed nothing, when the jet sat silent and confused on the hangar floor, he couldn't ignore it. He walked over with a light and a set of tools. He listened. He felt. And he heard the whisper of a problem nobody else had caught. That was the moment Colonel Hale saw him. That was when she turned his concern into humiliation. That was when she made a bet that would unravel her own career. Hangar 7 felt charged, like a storm gathering before lightning strikes. Word of Colonel Hale's public challenge spread fast, too fast. Mechanics drifted in from neighboring bays. Pilots paused mid-meal and wandered over. Administrative staff found excuses to pass through. 40 people became 50, then 60, forming a loose circle around the silent F-35 and the young recruit who'd just accepted an impossible bet. Darius stood beside the jet, hands steady, eyes focused. Across from him, Colonel Hale paced like a predator preparing to pounce, basking in the attention. "Well," she barked, "show us this miracle you're about to perform." But before Darius could speak, another voice cut through the crowd with calm authority. Colonel Hale. Chief Master Sergeant Elena Santos stepped forward, flight suit half unzipped, streaks of engine grease on her sleeves. At Fort Kingsley, her presence alone could silence a room. 25 years in the Air Force had earned her respect no one dared fake. "I'd like to hear what Thompson has to say before you turn this into a sideshow," Santos added. Hale stiffened. Santos's involvement wasn't part of her script. "Fine," Hale snapped. "Let the recruit embarrass himself properly." Santos ignored the jab and nodded to Darius. "Go ahead." Darius cleared his throat. "Ma'am, when Captain Park landed earlier, the engine noise was wrong. Higher pitch, unstable resonance. That usually means something's interfering with airflow in the compressor, possibly debris." Rodriguez, arms crossed near the diagnostic station, frowned. "Foreign object debris? We ran all standard checks." "Yes, sir," Darius said. "But tiny fragments can hide deep in the compressor stages. The sound changes before the damage does." Hill scoffed. "So we're basing military diagnostics on your feelings?" "It's not feelings," Darius said steadily. "It's physics. Harmonic distortion. The engine's voice shifts when something is lodged inside." Santos's expression sharpened. "Who taught you to listen like that?" "My grandfather, ma'am. Samuel Thompson. He maintained P-51 Mustangs for the Tuskegee Airmen." A wave of silence rolled across the hangar. Santos inhaled sharply. "Samuel Big Sam Thompson, from Montgomery?" "Yes, ma'am." She blinked once. "My father flew with the 332nd Fighter Group. He used to say your grandfather kept him alive. Called him the man who could coax a dying engine back from the dead." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Even Rodriguez looked stunned. Hale, sensing the shift, snapped, "Enough nostalgia. Stories don't fix jets." But eyes that once laughed at Darius now studied him with curiosity and something close to respect. Santos folded her arms. "Thompson, what exactly do you propose?" He took a breath. "First, I need silence. Total silence. Engines leave acoustic fingerprints. I can identify where the distortion comes from if the hangar is quiet." Someone laughed nervously. Hale pounced. "Silence. What is this, spiritual healing?" Darius didn't flinch. 10 minutes. No talking, no phones, no machinery running. That's all I need to confirm the problem." Before Hale could reject the idea, Santos turned to the crowd. "You heard him. Phones away. Mouths shut. Anyone who can't manage that can step outside." The authority in her tone brooked no argument. The hangar went still. Darius approached the 35 like he was approaching a wounded animal. He laid a hand on the metal skin, closed his eyes, listened. He moved slowly around the intake, tapping lightly with his knuckles, placing his ear against different sections. To an untrained eye, it looked absurd. To a mechanic, it looked like someone reading a machine's heartbeat. Rodriguez watched, conflicted. What's he doing? Diagnosing, Santos murmured. After 2 minutes, Darius pulled out his phone, not to scroll, but to open an acoustic analyzer. He tapped again. The phone displayed a frequency curve. Harmonic distortion at approximately 847 Hz, he said quietly. Normal for this engine family is around 834. Rodriguez's eyes widened. That was specific. Too specific to be guesswork. Which suggests debris, Darius continued. Small, probably lodged near the third compressor stage. Santos leaned closer. Can we access it? Not physically, Darius said. But there's another way. Hale raised an eyebrow. Here it comes. The miracle. We use a controlled reverse flow purge, he said. Manipulate the bleed valves, close the guide veins, and create a backward pressure wave to dislodge the fragment. That's not in any manual, Hale snapped. Doesn't mean it won't work, Rodriguez muttered, studying the schematic. It's risky, Santos said, but not reckless. The physics check out. Hale turned slowly, realizing the room was no longer entirely on her side. You people can't be serious, she said. We're going to trust a recruit over military-grade diagnostics. Rodriguez spoke up. Ma'am, with respect, he's the only one who's explained the failure pattern. The crowd murmured agreement. Santos looked at Darius. If we try this, you run the sequence. Yes, ma'am. She turned to Hale. Colonel, you made him a public offer. Are you backing down? A tense silence filled the hangar. Finally, tight-lipped, furious, Hale nodded once. Fine, she said. Run it. And when it fails, Thompson, your career goes with it. Darius didn't respond. He turned toward the jet, eyes steady. This time, he wasn't the janitor. He was the one man in the room who could hear what the engine had been trying to say all along. The hangar lights buzzed overhead as Darius stepped toward the F-35 like a surgeon approaching an open chest. The crowd held its breath. Phones were raised. Even the air felt still, thick with anticipation and doubt. Rodriguez, Darius said quietly. I'll need access to the engine control interface. Rodriguez hesitated only a moment before unlocking the diagnostics console. The old mechanic wasn't ready to say he believed Darius, but he believed enough to step aside. Darius connected a tablet, fingers moving quickly as he pulled up the F-135 engine's internal schematic. Stage 2 bleed valve, he murmured, 3.2 seconds. Stage 4, 2.8 with overlap. Guide veins to minimum flow. You're actually doing this, Carter whispered from the crowd. Santos shot her a look. Quiet. Hale stood rigid, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. She'd planned a public humiliation. Instead, she'd become a spectator to something she couldn't control. Darius paused, thumb hovering over the command that would begin the reverse flow purge. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, but his hands were steady. He wasn't thinking about Hale's threat, or the Watchers, or even the career he might lose. He was thinking of Big Sam. Trust the patterns. Trust the engine. Trust yourself. Beginning purge sequence, Darius announced. He pressed the command. Deep inside the F-35, mechanical clicks echoed like the tension in the hangar snapping. Valves shifted. Air diverted. The entire aircraft gave a low, guttural groan as pressure reversed through pathways never meant to run backward. Rodriguez called out readings from the console. Pressure rising, still safe, temperature climbing. Hold it. Vibration spike. Darius didn't look away from the jet. Stay on it. The engine shuddered again. The sound was wrong, unnatural, but purposeful. The reverse pressure wave rippled through the compressor, a deep boom like a distant drum. Frequency dropping. Rodriguez shouted. 847, 842, 840. The crowd gasped. Even the ones who didn't understand the numbers understood the significance. Second cycle, Darius said. He activated the next sequence. The jet lurched slightly, not dangerous, but startling. A metallic rattle traveled down its spine like something shifting loose. There, Rodriguez yelled. Frequency dip, then stabilizing. That's debris movement. Hale's eyes widened. She hadn't expected anything to happen except a spectacular failure. Santos leaned closer. One more pulse. Darius nodded. Third cycle. 3 seconds. He triggered it. A final blast of reverse airflow roared through the engine, followed by a sudden, eerie quiet. For a moment, nobody moved, not even Darius. Then the diagnostic screen flashed green. Frequency at 834 Hz, Rodriguez said in disbelief. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. A ripple of murmurs swept through the hangar. Darius exhaled. Resetting valves. Guide vanes returning to normal. Ready for engine start. Santos stepped forward. Thompson, you sure? No, ma'am, he said honestly. But the engine is. He moved to the main control panel. The start switch gleamed under the hangar lights, waiting. He flipped it. For one heartbeat, silence. Then, a soft whine. A rising hum. A sudden roar as ignition caught, and the turbine spun to life. The F-35's engine awakened like a giant taking its first clean breath in hours. No rattles. No grinding. No instability. Just a pure, flawless crescendo of power. Rodriguez checked readings frantically, then broke into a grin so wide it made him look 20 years younger. All green, he shouted over the roar. Compressor stable. Temperatures nominal. Vibration perfect. She's back. The crowd erupted. Applause thundered. Some cheered. Some whistled. A few mechanics high-fived like kids at a ball game. Santos stepped toward Darius, eyes shining with pride. You just saved our demonstration and possibly our pilots' lives. Outstanding work. Darius nodded, trying to hide the tremble of relief in his hands. Behind them, Hale stood frozen, pale, shaken, caught between disbelief and humiliation. She'd handed him a challenge meant to break him. Instead, he'd accomplished what her entire engineering team couldn't. And he'd done it in front of everyone. As the engine powered down, the crowd slowly quieted, but the energy remained electric. The kind of moment people would talk about for years. Rodriguez clapped Darius on the back. Kid, you just rewrote maintenance protocol. Carter nodded, stunned. I'll never look at an engine the same way again. And Santos said the words that sealed everything. You're not a janitor, Thompson. You're a damn engineer. Darius didn't smile, not fully, but his shoulders lifted just a bit. For the first time since arriving at Fort Kingsley, he stood as an equal among them. No, he stood above them. Hale's voice finally cut through the hush. This isn't finished, she hissed. But everyone could see the truth. For her, it was. For him, it was only the beginning. The F-35's engine spun down slowly, echo fading into a stunned, electrified silence. One by one, the onlookers lowered their phones. No one moved. No one spoke. It felt like the air itself was waiting. Then, like a spark catching dry grass, the hangar erupted. Applause crashed through the room. Cheering. Whistles. Mechanics who doubted him moments earlier slapped Darius on the shoulder or reached out to shake his hand. The roar of praise almost matched the roar of the engine itself. But Darius? He just breathed, steady, grounding, the way his grandfather taught him. Inside, relief washed through him like a tidal wave, but outwardly he stayed calm. He had done what he came to do. Chief Santos strode toward him first. Thompson, she said, gripping his hand firmly. That was mastery. Not luck. Not accident. Skill. Pure skill. Her praise meant more than the cheers. It carried weight, history, authority. Rodriguez followed, eyes bright. You didn't just fix an engine. You taught us something new. I've been doing this 20 years, and I've never seen anything like that. Then he pointed at the silent jet. Reverse flow purge. I can't believe it worked that cleanly. It worked, Darius said quietly, because the engine told us where the problem was. A ripple of agreement spread through the mechanics. They'd all heard his explanation. They'd all seen the results. Suddenly, the kid who'd been mopping floors was someone worth listening to. But the energy shifted when everyone realized who hadn't spoken yet. Colonel Hale. She stood stiffly near the wing of the jet, arms at her sides, posture no longer commanding, just rigid, brittle. The color had drained from her face. Her eyes darted between the crowd, the jet, and Darius, as though trying to rewrite what had just happened. Santos turned toward her like a judge, signaling the next witness. Colonel, she said, voice even but sharp, I believe you owe this man something. A murmur rippled across the hangar. Hale swallowed. Hard. Darius stepped forward, Not aggressively, not smug, just steady. Ma'am, I'm not here to embarrass you. I just want what you promised. The officer training recommendation. And a chance to serve where I'm actually useful. Hill's mouth tightened. Her pride fought desperately to hold the line, but she had no ground left. Dozens of phones had recorded her challenge. Her insult. Her bet. Her promise. She couldn't deny it. I'll honor it, she said at last, her voice strained. You'll have your recommendation. And your training assignment. The crowd didn't cheer, didn't taunt. They just watched, because this was something bigger than victory. This was justice. Still, Hale wasn't finished. She stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough that only nearby onlookers heard. But don't mistake today for a triumph, Thompson. One success doesn't erase limitations. Darius met her gaze, calm and unshaken. No, ma'am. But sometimes one success reveals them. A few people inhaled sharply. Hale stiffened, stung. Santos stepped in, her presence radiating command. Colonel, if you have nothing constructive to add, we're done here. Thompson's work speaks for itself. Hale hesitated, then turned sharply and left the hangar. Her footsteps echoed like retreat. Silence followed her out, and then the mood broke into celebration. Carter jogged over, practically buzzing. Darius, that was insane. You made the engine sing. I didn't think that was possible. Others crowded in with questions. How'd you know the exact frequency shift? Can you teach us that acoustic trick? Where'd you learn to read patterns like that? Darius answered as best he could, but his eyes drifted toward Santos. She nodded subtly, a signal that they'd talk privately. And they did. Minutes later, outside the hangar in the cool night air, Santos stood beside him, arms folded. You changed the culture in there, she said. Not just the engine. Darius frowned. I wasn't trying to. That's what makes it powerful. She paused. Listen, I'm putting your name forward for the warrant officer program. Not in 6 months. Now, the Pentagon will want to hear about the technique you used. What you did tonight could save aircraft across the force. He blinked. Pentagon. Santos smiled faintly. You didn't just fix a jet, Thompson. You fixed a blind spot. And officers are supposed to lead innovation, not just follow procedure. He let out a slow breath. I just listened. Yes, she said softly. To the engine. And to something a lot of people ignored because of who you are, not what you can do. It hit him then, not pride, but recognition. For years, he had been underestimated, sidelined, pushed into shadows. Tonight, he stepped into the light. Not because of a title, because of truth. Behind them, the F-35 sat peacefully, no longer a problem, but a promise. Santos clapped a hand on his shoulder. Get some rest, Thompson. Tomorrow, you start writing the next chapter. And trust me, her smile sharpened. This base is never going to be the same. Darius nodded. He knew she was right. Tonight, he had changed the engine. Tomorrow, he'd change the system. Colonel Veronica Hale stared at the cardboard box on her desk, the same box she'd once ordered a recruit to use for cleaning closets. Now it held her own belongings, a nameplate, a few medals, a coffee mug that read command has no off switch. Her new office smelled of dust and old paperwork. No windows, no runway view, no jets screaming overhead. The humbling silence of Fort Kingsley's administrative basement pressed in like a cage. 3 weeks had passed since Hangar 7. 3 weeks since her downfall. Her transfer orders sat on the desk, stamped and final. Joint Base Aurora Ridge, Meteorological Operations. Report, 0600 hours. Alaska. From the hottest testing facility in the Air Force to snow charts and wind readings. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison stepped in, crisp and composed. Your transport leaves tomorrow, Colonel. She forced a bitter smile. Weather duty. Quite the demotion. Morrison didn't smile back. Call it a reset. A place to reflect. Your record earned you that much. She looked away. The unspoken truth hung between them. Her record before Fort Kingsley had been spotless. But here, her own bias had undone her. Good luck, Morrison added. He left without waiting for a response. When he was gone, Hale finally let herself sag into the chair. She hadn't just lost authority. She'd lost the respect that mattered far more. One recruit, she thought bitterly. One recruit changed everything. But part of her knew the truth. Darius hadn't changed anything. He had merely revealed what was already broken. Across the base, in a bright, newly renovated classroom, Warrant Officer candidate Darius Thompson adjusted the F-135 schematic on the digital wall. 20 recruits sat in neat rows, eyes fixed on him as if he were already an officer. And that, Darius explained, tapping the compressor diagram, is why harmonic distortion matters. Computers can detect failure, but sometimes only the human ear can detect its cause. A hand shot up. Sir, is that how you figured out the failure last month? Darius smiled slightly. Exactly. Engines speak through patterns. You don't need magic, just patience. The recruits scribbled notes, hanging on every word. Chief Santos watched from the doorway, pride warming her expression. She had pushed his recommendation through at record speed. The Pentagon had reviewed his report twice and requested a briefing on the Thompson method, now an official term. Across NATO bases, early versions of the reverse flow purge protocol were already preventing failures. 12 aircraft saved in 3 weeks. Countless lives indirectly protected. Darius didn't boast about it. He didn't even mention it unless asked. That humility made the reforms spreading through Fort Kingsley even more powerful. Promotion boards now evaluated skill over pedigree. Training opportunities had been reopened to overlooked recruits. A committee reviewed past applications Hale had blocked. Some of those airmen now sat in Darius's classroom, learning because he had broken a door they weren't even allowed to knock on before. In Alabama, in a quiet nursing home, an elderly man held a letter with trembling hands. His granddaughter had read it to him twice already. A news story played silently on the TV. Local airman innovates engine repair method adopted fleet-wide. Big Sam chuckled softly. My boy did good, he whispered. He picked up a pen, wrote slowly, deliberately. Grandson, I saw you on the television. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. Engines talk. Yes, but you spoke for people, too. Those who get ignored. Those who get pushed aside. You fixed more than a jet. You fixed thinking. Keep listening. To engines, and to your own truth. Love. Big Sam. When Darius opened that letter days later, standing alone in his quarters, the words blurred through tears he didn't bother to hide. He folded it carefully and placed it inside his uniform pocket, the same pocket he wore during every training session. A reminder of where he came from. A promise of where he was going. Meanwhile, at Joint Base Aurora Ridge, Hale stepped off a cargo plane into biting wind and endless white. A young sergeant met her with a clipboard. Welcome, Colonel. Weather stations this way. We track storms, not aircraft. Hale nodded stiffly. As she walked toward her new assignment, snow crunching beneath her boots, she realized something painful. This wasn't punishment. It was consequence. For years, she'd demanded respect without giving it. For months, she'd suppressed potential she should have elevated. And in one night, her arrogance had been exposed to the world. She would do her job. She would serve. But she would never command like she once did. Back at Fort Kingsley, Chief Santos joined Darius after class. You ready for tomorrow? She asked. The Pentagon briefing? He shook his head, smiling. Not even a little. You'll be fine, she said. They called you the man who listens to engines. That's a compliment in our world. He laughed softly. Imagine telling 10-year-old me that. I think he'd believe it, Santos said. Your grandfather certainly would. They stepped into the sunlight, the runway ahead humming with life. An F-35 taxied past, engines singing perfectly, clean, strong, alive. Darius listened, not just to the engine, but to everything around him. Opportunity, responsibility, change. And he smiled, knowing something with absolute certainty. This was just the beginning.